Today's episode of Better Bad Ideas is brought to you by LaborFirst.
I'm Sean O'Brien, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
Put your helmets on, buckle your chin straps. It's a full contact sport.
We're going to find out who has a better bad idea. Today on Better Bad Ideas, we're going to do something different. We've almost been a year since we launched this podcast, and we're very grateful for the support of our listeners. So we want to do something different. So we asked our listeners to submit questions that they may have about what's going on in unions, what's going on in America today. And so today we're going to answer your questions. We're going to talk about a lot of issues that are affecting American workers and the potential for increasing union density, and also talk about the future of the American worker and how AI will affect it. But first, I have to address something. As many people know, we are very active politically, trying to work bipartisan to make sure that American workers are well represented in this country, American workers are appreciated in this country, and that the American workers are valued for the services that they provide, whether it's in building and construction, whether it's in aviation, whether it's in package delivery, whether it's in rubbish pickup, or any job, blue collar wide, that makes America that much profitable, but more importantly, provides great opportunity for careers for working people. But one thing that's a little troubling to me has been this shutdown. Now, very controversial. It's the longest shutdown in our history. 41 days as of the viewing and or launch of this episode, with no real end in sight, with the exception that apparently 5 Democrats have now spoken how they want to support a clean CR, which was voted on in March and passed, and it's the same CR. The issue is the extension of the Obamacare issue for health care. That was a policy under the Biden administration regarding the tough times during COVID. It was supposed to sunset in December 31st of this year. And, that's been a hot topic for the Democrats, and the Republicans have taken a position that they'll continue to negotiate over it, which, it's like anything else. Anybody that's been involved in negotiations, there's always a motive on either side. So that's the reservation of getting this thing resolved. Ironically, last week, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, I was at a meeting at the White House. I was called by the vice president and to sit in a meeting regarding the effect that the shutdown was having on the economy, but more importantly, on working class Americans. And the topic was with airline professionals, unions that are represented in the airlines, the pilots unions, the Teamsters unions. And I sat at that table, and it was a roundtable discussion with the Secretary of the Department of Transportation, Secretary Duffy. And we talked about what the issues potentially could be if the shutdown continued. Now, as you know, the government employees are not getting paid, whether you're TSA, air traffic controllers, and many other people that work and support aviation in this country. So we were at that meeting potentially talking about solutions to the problem and how we could get this shutdown resolved. And there was a lot of passion in that meeting. There was pilot unions represented with pilots, and they were talking about how they notice that there is an amount of stress with passengers because of the airline traffic controllers not getting paid. The airline traffic controllers, some of them, the fear was they're going to have to get second jobs to support themselves. Some of them are just going to leave that profession because they've been through it under previous administration, under the shutdowns. So there was a real concern, and the pilots testified in that hearing, and it wasn't an official hearing, it was a round table of they can actually see and they hear, the fear in the voices of the air traffic controllers when they're talking to them. And the air traffic controllers, I got to tell you this. I mean, they are rock stars. They are so professional even through the toughest times. But as this shutdown goes on, that concern is real, that you're going to see a loss of jobs because people will be leaving. You're going to see people not wanting to go into that field. And by the way, prior to this shutdown, you know, the head of the Air Traffic Controllers Union, who was a proud Marine, was saying that they were already understaffed and they were working with the administration to find a way to recruit new people to come into these jobs. And then lo and behold, the shutdown happened. So it was a pretty interesting meeting, but it was very, very powerful, the testimonies around that table. You had even CEOs of major airlines talking about what the impact could be if the shutdown carries on. And everybody that spoke at that table, including myself, the biggest concern was making sure that people were safe, making sure there was confidence in travel, but more importantly, ending this shutdown and encouraging both sides to get back to the table. Because what's happening now is you see both sides pointing fingers at each other, talking about who's right, who's wrong. And as a negotiator, you know, I negotiate for a living. We negotiate some of the biggest deals. UPS was the biggest deal. And the worst thing that can happen in any negotiation is both sides stop talking. And when both sides stop talking, no different than what's going on right now in the Senate, the people that are affected the most have the least amount to do with the negotiations. You've got the government employees that are furloughed. Some, it's told they're going to lose their job. People are being forced to go to work and not get paid. Now, you know how bad morale can be when things aren't going right. And those are the people that are put in the middle of this terrible fight that's going on internally. And I was very committed and passionate about making sure that both sides get back to the table, negotiate a clean CR, and like anything else in life or anything else in negotiations, you continue to work that problem till you get resolution that is in the best interest of the people that you get paid to represent. That's the constituents that vote you into your office. And hopefully we do see an end in sight. There has been speculation that there's been some Republican senators that are now going to support a clean CR and continue to negotiate. But time will tell if that's actually going to happen. But I got to say this again. People need to get back to the table. People need to find a clear-cut remedy and continue to not put working people, especially people that are very critical to the safety and security of our airports and our flights. And ironically, unfortunately, 2 days after this meeting, a terrible tragedy happened where a UPS plane, upon takeoff in Louisville, Kentucky, crashed, and we lost 16 plus lives and many more potentially as the investigation keeps going on. And air traffic control had nothing to do, and/or the shutdown had nothing to do with this horrific crash. But a terrible tragedy, and we've seen many terrible tragedies, especially in my lifetime, where even though there may be difference of agreement politically on many different issues, when there's a terrible tragedy like 9/11, like the Boston bombing, people usually in the American public and politicians usually rally around that horrific incident and come to resolution. I actually thought that was going to happen, and it hasn't, and that would have maybe promoted some resolution to this shutdown. But it's unfortunate that accident didn't do that. What's more important is that we find out why this accident occurred. There's always going to be speculation. The plane was 34 years old. Was it too old to be in the air? Wasn't there an issue mechanically the prior weekend where it was serviced by a third-party vendor? That's all speculation. But I can say this, we represent about 5,000 or 6,000 UPS mechanics nationwide out of Local 2727 in Louisville, Kentucky. They are the best in the business, and they would not would not allow a plane to take off and fly if there was something mechanically wrong with it. And, the pilots have a huge responsibility as well when they have to inspect the planes before takeoff, making sure that it's safe, making sure that no one's put at risk. And look, the NTSB is doing a tremendous job of investigating this right now. And it's going to be, time will tell what actually caused this horrific crash. And the one thing that we can't lose sight of the fact in this horrific crash is that families lost husbands, families lost wives, families lost children in this accident. And no matter what happened or what caused it, we can't lose sight of the fact of the true victims here and make sure that we honor their service at UPS, their service in other industries where that plane crash touched upon and people lost their lives. So, I would encourage the American public and the politicians to take a hard look at what happened at UPS and take a hard look at what we are actually fighting over and come to some sort of resolution and think about what's the most important thing. It's keeping American people's work and make sure the safety of this country is not compromised, especially with the military, and make sure that working people get put back to work and get paid. So the best part about this podcast right now is we launched it a year ago, as I stated earlier, and we want to hear from our viewers on what questions they have. A lot of times in this podcast, we'll have very diverse guests on very diverse subjects. But we felt it was important that we hear from the audience and answer questions that they have. So one of the questions that we get posed all the time, and it was posed by one of our viewers, is you've been vocal about expanding beyond traditional Teamster industries into logistics, tech, and entertainment. What's the biggest obstacle to organizing the next generation of workers? Well, first off, the biggest obstacle is combating union busting. That is a $400 million business where these corporations and these companies and now big tech are paying these union busters to come in when there is an organizing drive and to basically retaliate and threaten people's lives from organizing. So that is probably the biggest obstacle. The other obstacle of organizing is this independent contractor model that the Amazons of the world, that the Uber and the Lyfts and many other of these tech companies are using, where they require people to work under their rules and regulations. They require people to wear their brands. They require people to utilize their equipment under their brands, but will take no responsibility for being the employer that they are. So they hide behind this independent contractor model, which makes it extremely difficult for unions to organize. That is another example of a scheme by corporate America to not have a unionized workforce. The other potential threat to organizing workers is, as everybody is aware, we have seen the implementation over the last 10 years of AI and also productivity as a result of new technology. And that has affected many jobs, many blue-collar jobs in this country. And when you target an industry to organize, a lot of times it's geared around job protection, better pay, better benefits, and job security. And if you've recently seen the appetite in this country, especially where big tech is so involved in the political scheme in this country, where people want to implement AI, which is going to replace and destroy millions of jobs throughout this whole country. And it's not just blue-collar jobs. We're talking about white-collar jobs. I recently had a discussion with one of the pioneers of AI, who was strange. Our worlds would never collide and or intersect. In fact, we would probably be on opposite ends of arguments regarding AI and the implementation and the effect on jobs. And I had this meeting with this person, and one of the audience members asked the question is like, what's the real threat you see in AI and what's the opportunity? So the real threat that we see in AI always is, efficiencies that are going to destroy jobs, robots. I mean, I think Amazon, and you know that Amazon is one of our biggest targets, and we've continued to make inroads of organizing those workers. But we are a society of convenience, unfortunately. I think we're all guilty as charged. Once we hit that send button, we want instant gratification, but I don't think we take a look at, the effect this is going to have on American jobs. And so when I was talking to this professional, or one of the architects of AI, he told me to look at AI as a pyramid and divide that pyramid into thirds. And the top of that pyramid is the C-suite CEOs that continue to gouge working people, continue to accelerate their ridiculous compensation and take care of Wall Street instead of Main Street. And then in the middle of that pyramid, who was never really affected by AI, is going to be that middle level manager. And I'm speaking in general terms, not specifying one industry, but these were general terms where this person told me, look in the middle of that pyramid. That's where your analysts are. That's where your accountants are. That's where a lot of attorneys are. And he said, those are the people that are going to be replaced by AI. Like their jobs are going to be wiped out because AI is going to be able to do every one of their jobs. So if you wipe out that middle tranche and you now have a divide between CEO and C-suite people in Wall Street, and then you have the blue-collar workers that make these corporations a success. As a result of the elimination of that middle tier of those white-collar jobs, one of two things can happen, and we know the probability of what's going to happen. There's going to be such a tremendous amount of savings from the elimination of those white-collar jobs that most likely CEOs in Wall Street will benefit the most from that. And ironically, I took a position that's like, no, what should happen is working people's wages should be increased. Working people's benefits should be increased. They should have the best benefits as a result of all that savings. And those people that lost their white-collar jobs, and it's going to continue to, probably get worse because as technology advances, there should be money set aside to retrain those folks to do the jobs of the blue-collar workers in those industries. So it's a very interesting, but I got to be honest with you, scary time. The fear of the unknown of what actually AI can do. And we know that whenever technology is implemented, that technology is geared towards efficiencies, but also doing less with more, meaning doing more with less, doing more work with less people. But I also believe, and we've actually been successful in industries that we represent in the Teamsters Union, that there is an opportunity to create jobs as a result of the implementation of AI and also technology such as robots and automation. And we just have to be more vigilant and have conversations with these companies and corporations that we represent that are going to implement and or try and replace jobs with AI and efficiencies. We've got to identify opportunities. For instance, if they are going to automate a grocery warehouse or a UPS facility, a DHL facility, or any facility, we got to make sure that our members are trained on how to fix that technology, trained on how to upload that technology, trained on how to maintain that technology. And we've been successful in the grocery warehouse division where, there was, for the last 10 years, there has been a real appetite to automate these warehouses. And in some instances they have. But we've also created jobs as a result of this technology where people's jobs would be eliminated maybe as selectors, but now they are maintaining the technology, they're building the technology, they're programming the technology. So we just got to be a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more vigilant in identifying jobs that blue-collar people and the American worker can still perform and maintain a real vibrant middle class. the one thing people always ask me as well is like, Sean, do you want to be a hindrance to the implementation of technology and efficiency? And I always tell them, well, look at our logo. Our logo is based upon work that we performed going back to 1900s or early 1900s, late 1800s, where we provided goods and services to this country via horse and buggy. And, if we were going to look to impede technology, then we would have never embraced a combustible engine. We would never embraced such automation as trucks. We would still be delivering goods and service. Can you imagine delivering goods and services in 2025 in the city of Boston or the city of Chicago or the city of New York with horse-drawn carriages loaded up with supplies while Waymos and Ubers and Lyfts and all these other white-collar crime syndicates that are eliminating jobs? I mean, look, we're not trying to be a hindrance to any technology. We don't want to hinder the implementation, but we want to be part of the process and part of the discussion on what effects will happen in the event that these technologies are implemented. We want to make sure that the employer or whoever's looking to implement this technology takes into consideration the impact it's going to have on working families in this country and recommit to providing opportunity and jobs as a result of this implementation. So it's scary times, but we are a society of convenience, and we got to make sure that when we hit that send button or we're on our smartphones ordering something and or going to the supermarket instead of going to a human at the register and going to a self-checkout, we've got to take into consideration that each time we utilize these conveniences that it could be destroying good American jobs, and we can't let that happen. So we're going to continue to vigilantly negotiate the strongest contracts with protections. We are going to continue to organize in industries, regardless of whether technology has an impact or not, and continue to be vigilant against anything, not just technology, that destroys American jobs. This episode is brought to you by LaborFirst, the leader in healthcare navigation and advocacy for plan sponsors, union members, and retirees. Navigating healthcare isn't easy, especially when it comes to Medicare, and it shouldn't fall on our retirees' shoulders alone. That's where LaborFirst comes in. They work one-on-one with members to help them understand their benefits, resolve issues, and get the care they've earned. From answering tough questions to fixing billing problems, LaborFirst is in your corner every step of the way. No call centers, no runaround, just healthcare advocates who care. LaborFirst was founded by a proud Teamster son and grandson. For over 60 years, his father and grandfather led Teamsters Local 837, now Local 107 in Philadelphia, with pride, purpose, and grit. That same union spirit runs through everything LaborFirst does today. Now, hundreds of union health plans trust LaborFirst as a true partner, delivering results, supporting members and retirees, and never forgetting who they're working for. When it comes to protecting what your members have earned, LaborFirst stands with you. Please visit LaborFirst.com to learn more. This episode is brought to you by Catches Law Group, proud advocates for injured workers and their families since 1986. If you've been hurt on the job, navigating the workers' comp system can feel like fighting an uphill battle. That's where Catches Law comes in. They've recovered over $3 billion for hardworking people just like you, and they don't back down when your rights are on the line. They know what it means to stand shoulder to shoulder with unions and workers across this country. Because at Catches Law, it's not just about compensation, it's about justice. To learn more, visit catcheslaw.com. That's KECHES law.com. Now, Catches Law has been representing working people for decades upon decades. There is no one that fights harder for injured workers throughout this country. I've single-handedly been involved in many cases where our members who were subjected to repetitive lifting, bending, and stooping, their bodies wear out and they can no longer do the job and they get injured. There is no one that fights harder to make sure that these members are protected, but more importantly, their families are secure knowing that Catches Law has their back. To learn more, again, visit catcheslaw.com. That's KECHES CHESlaw.com. One of the questions from our audience, because we've been very vigilant as a labor movement, just not as a Teamsters movement. The Teamsters, we have struck 300 employers in 3.5 years. UAW had a big strike 2.5 years ago. Many other unions are striking all over the country. And the question was, has public support for strikes increased more so in the last 5 years compared to the last decade? And how do you decide when it's time to walk off the job and when to negotiate? Now, I've been very clear on who causes strikes. It's usually the employer who doesn't want to provide the best benefits, best wages, and protections to the people that make their business a success. So you'll often hear me talk about, if we are in a critical negotiations like we were 2.5 years ago with the United Parcel Service, who's the largest collective bargaining agreement in the country, you often heard me say, look, we don't want to have to strike 340,000 of our members, walk off the job to get what they want. If UPS chooses not to reward their employees, our members, who provide them the success that they have, then UPS and any other company in those situations are striking themselves. And, coming out of COVID, where all of our members and many union workers and many blue-collar American workers around this country went to work every single day during COVID with total disregard to the safety of themselves and their families. We had working people lose their lives during COVID, working, providing the goods and services to keep this country moving. And that was a very defining time, not only for the Teamsters Union, but I think for the American workers. For once, in my lifetime, we actually saw people embracing the hard work of working people in this country for keeping this country moving. And I was extremely proud of our members who delivered packages, who stocked grocery shelves, who delivered food, who held blood drives at the American Red Cross, who picked up the trash in the communities where we all live. And people embraced, our members, the general public embraced how important and how essential the American worker was during these times. And a lot of these corporations, or most of these corporations, saw record earnings during these times. And I really truly thought that there would be a different opinion when COVID ended, and that people would look back. When I say people, these corporations would look back and say, wow, our employees are the best around. Our employees provided the goods and services. Our employees were awesome. Our employees helped us achieve record earnings. Let's reward these people. And it's like anything else. Once you're viewed as a hero and you're not useful to anybody else, now you're determined to be a zero. And I truly thought that, corporations, especially going to the bargaining table, would appreciate the work that was done. And for the most part, people forget how valuable we are to this country. And so we have gone to the table over the last 3.5 years, I know many other unions have, in reminding these employers, reminding corporate America, reminding politicians that union workers, the American worker, is responsible for the success of this country. Not only did we build this country, but through the most difficult times, through the fear of the unknown of COVID, we continue to strive and provide good jobs, provide a good service, and we want to be rewarded for our work. So we went to every bargaining table and we reminded all of these employers, whether it was at Cisco, whether it was at US Foods, whether it was Republic Waste, whether it was at UPS, how valuable our members, your employees were during COVID. And we want to be rewarded for our service. And it's funny, one of the questions says, when do you walk off the job? Well, the company is the one that forces us to walk off the job when they don't respect the proposals made by our rank and file members, their employees, when they're not paying attention to the true testimonials our members are giving across the table. Because every negotiation, especially in the Teamsters Union, we have rank and file members sitting at that table, giving true testimonials to employers who never did that job, employers who were only focused on the bottom line of a balance sheet. And when employers get ignorant and don't want to listen to our members, they choose to strike themselves. And that's when we have to prove how valuable we are and withhold our labor until the employer realizes that they need our members to go back to work. They need to reward our members. They need our members for the success of their country. So, the question is, when is it time to walk off the job? The time to walk off the job is when the employer refuses to give our members what they have earned and demanded. And that's when we walk off the job. Other than that, it's usually up to the employer to reward our members. This is a great question from the audience, and I'm so glad someone asked this. If you fast forward 10 years, what's your vision of a modern American union, and how does it look and feel different from today? That is a great question, because I think if everybody reads the surveys over the last 2.5 to 3 years, 70% of Americans approve and support union workers. And that's a great thing. I think it's a great thing because going back to what we spoke about earlier, how valuable our members were during COVID, I think people realize that over the next 10 years is going to be very critical for working people. And based upon the demonstration of being able to provide the best labor, most efficient labor, most productive labor, unions are very popular. And I think we're going to have a great opportunity to continue to grow the labor movement. I know the Teamsters Union, I can speak for the Teamsters Union, we have organized 90,000 new members in 3.5 years in various industries. And I think everybody knows the Teamsters Union is a very diverse union where we represent everybody from airline pilots to zookeepers and everybody in between. And, I think that's important to continue looking at our traditional industries. Every union should be looking at their traditional industries and looking for ways to grow and organize. But the other part of that question is, how does it look and feel different from today? So 10 years from now, especially with the implementation of AI, especially with the implementation of technology, the American worker may look a lot different in 10 years than it does today. However, we can never lose sight of looking back and realizing what our core industries are and were. How do we protect those core industries? But more importantly, how do we branch out and organize a new workforce that may not be working in traditional Teamster industries? You take, for instance, right now, the cannabis industry. Now, we know that it's controversial. We know that it's legal in many states. It's not legal on a federal level. But there are 450,000 cannabis workers, W-2. They haven't fell victim to this scam like most Amazon and other corporations utilize to keep workers subdued. There's 450,000 cannabis workers. They work from cultivation, warehousing, there's going to be distribution, and then retail. That is an industry that is going to need unionization because many of these states have given out a lot of these licenses in cannabis where they saturated the market. And a lot of people that have these licenses have tried and failed at the business in these states. So what we believe we're going to see is, in the event that cannabis is legalized in the United States and the safe banking laws are changed, that you're going to see a big push of private equity acquisitions of a lot of these mom and pops in these states. And you're going to see maybe 4 or 5 big players in this industry, which is going to be basically corporate America running this industry. So we need to be vigilant and be on the ground and playing a role in not only getting legalized marijuana federally, but also changing the safe banking laws, but more importantly, being involved in these acquisitions. When I say involved, making sure that the workers are protected, making sure that workers have the right to organize, whether it's through card check or neutrality, that makes it easy to organize. So that's kind of the stuff we're looking at as well. We've also partnered up with many casinos. Gambling was something that people went to Las Vegas to do. Now many states are passing legalization of gambling. So we have opportunity there as well to organize those workers, and we have a demonstrable record of representing majority of workers in Las Vegas and in Atlantic City and many of these other places that have gambling. But that's going to be another opportunity as well. So, it's going to look a lot different, and I'm encouraged about the difference and the opportunities moving forward. But the one thing we have to do better as a union and better as a labor movement is embrace the change and embrace the difference of this next generation of workers. That is going to be the biggest challenge to organizing over the next 10 years, because these new industries that we all seek to represent, and these industries that have people working there that have no generational connection to the union. Everybody knows that I'm a fourth generation Teamster. Everybody knows that I talk about how I learned about the union around my dinner table, and that the union was so prevalent in my life, and that it has given me and my family everything in our lives. And it's never wavered through the good times or the bad times. And I knew that because I experienced it, but I also heard about it because, fourth generation, that's a lot of time in a union. And unions, for the most part, always had a generational connection where your grandfather might have been a Teamster, or your dad was a Teamster, you're a Teamster, or your dad was a plumber, and you're a plumber. That's not happening anymore. So you've got this new wave of workers that are coming into these unions, and they're a lot different than us. They communicate differently. They're on their iPhones. They don't look like us. They don't act like us. But we have to embrace this next generation, and we have to actually train this next generation and give them a history lesson on why we currently enjoy the conditions we have, we make the wages we have, and also the job protections. Because if we're not educating this next generation of workers, and we are not talking about protecting and preserving our jobs, then these American workers, this next generation, may not be armed with the tools to protect, preserve, and improve working conditions for Americans. And I think it's extremely valuable to embrace this next generation, train this next generation, and also listen to this next generation. The one criticism that I think we all can own is that when we get a thought or idea in our head, we think that we are right, and we think that's all that matters. And when people have a difference of opinions, we don't want to hear it because we've been in the industry for 30 years and we know what's best. I think we need to be better at taking a step back, listening to the new ideas, the new technologies of these new members coming in, and embrace and try and collaborate and come up with a plan and a strategy to make sure that the labor movement continues to thrive, continues to grow. I'm very excited about the future of unions. I hope I live long enough to see the success carried out. But more importantly, we just got to continue to have conversation. We've got to continue to have dialogue. It's good to have debate. It's good to have disagreement. But it's also great to channel that debate and disagreement into something positive that's going to work for American workers. The greatest thing about the Teamsters Union, we are the most democratic union in the entire country. We have a convention where people get nominated every 5 years to be leaders of this great union. You have the General Executive Board, which is elected by each member, one vote. We have that election every 5 years. And it's a great, elections are great. Elections are great because it gives people the opportunity to voice their opinions, gives people the opportunity to pick their leader. And I'm proud of the fact of the Teamsters Union being the most diverse union in the country. But I love the fact that it's one member, one vote, and our members have a voice when it comes to picking their leaders. And I was fortunate enough at the age of 49 years old to be elected the general president of 1.3 million hardworking men and women in the Teamsters Union. We represent the United States, Guam, and Puerto Rico. And elections are tough. I mean, elections bring the worst out in people. And I've been going through elections my 35-year career. I started out as a truck driver at Shaughnessy and Ahern. I'm a rigger by trade. And then I moved up through the ranks of my local union 25 in Boston, where I took that over in 2006 at 33 years old. I was the youngest president ever elected to Local 25. We grew that union to 12,500 members in the city of Boston just by organizing and representing workers. I also was a principal officer of Joint Council 10, which oversaw 6 states, all the local unions within New England. And then I was elected as a international vice president in 2012 at 39 years old, and sat on that general executive board for 2 terms as a vice president. And then I decided that, it was our time to take back our union and put in the hands of the most important people, the 1.3 million members that we represent. And we went through a tough election. I had a falling out with Jim Hoffer Jr. Fred Zuckerman and I joined forces together because we saw the power of the Teamsters diminishing under the previous administration. We saw concessionary contracts. We witnessed the lack of growth. And so we put together a team and we decided to run to take back the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and put it in the hands of the most important people. Prior to us winning this election, our organization for 22 years was run top down, meaning that decisions were made without any consideration of the most important people who give us the opportunity to represent them as our members. So we put together a whole platform on what we wanted to see change. We want to get the strongest contracts, and we have got the strongest contracts. We've got record industry-leading contracts, whether it was at UPS, whether it's at Republic, whether it's at food distributions, where we are getting industry-leading contracts because we are actually putting together contract campaigns. We are actually organizing new members. We are, more importantly, engaging the rank and file members to be part of these campaigns, and it's proven useful in making sure that we continue to make this union bigger, faster, stronger. And we've done a lot of great work over the last 3.5 years. As I mentioned earlier, we organized 90,000 new members. And by organizing 90,000 new members in 3 years, we have surpassed what it took 22 years for the Hoffer administration, who organized about 50,000 members in 22 years. So we have focused on the unorganized. We have focused on getting the best contracts. And then politically, we have put ourselves in a position where we have been working both sides of the aisle since we were sworn in March 22nd, 2022, where we knew and recognized it's important to be politically active. We are the most powerful union in this country, and we are the most influential union in this country. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a say in what goes on for American workers, but more importantly, have a seat at the table with any administration, whether we support them, we didn't support them. It's funny, we talk about the elections and we talk about opportunity. And the hard work that we've done over 3.5 years, getting the best contracts, organizing new members, and also being politically influential once again in this country, there is always people that want to take an opportunity to take a shot at you. And like I said, I embrace democracy. I embrace our members' right to choose their leadership. So we got an email from Wayne Atkins. I believe he's a UPS driver in Ohio, who wanted to talk about, or wanted me to address, the inward-facing camera issue and the LIDX technology that we negotiated protections in the previous agreement on. And there's a lot of concern, especially from Brother Atkins, where he thinks that they are using these inward-facing cameras, which can't be utilized, and also this LIDX that can trigger images. Now, look, there's all kinds of speculation on the technology of LIDX and anything else that UPS does. The one thing that I am clear on is that we negotiated protections that does not allow UPS to utilize inward-facing cameras. The one thing that we argued across the table, we made that a strike issue, is that our members are held hostage at UPS through technology alone, through GPS, through the dyads. And the one thing is that we don't want to be held hostage where an inward-facing camera is going to watch everything we do every single day. And we made that a strike issue. UPS backed off of that and agreed that any cameras that were currently, because you had some local unions, believe it or not, prior to us taking over, that agreed to allow on a pilot program to have cameras inside the cabs of these vehicles. And that was prior to our administration, prior to engaging in the last round of negotiations. And we took a real hard line saying it would be a strike issue. With that said, there's this lytics technology that's in the vehicles, and there has been allegations that they're utilizing this lytics technology to evaluate performance, and UPS has claim that there's triggers that trigger it. But the one thing that's clear, and I can tell you, no one will be disciplined and or terminated as a result of any technology. There are no inward-facing cameras, and if there were inward-facing cameras in certain areas, they were either removed or covered up. This issue, the beauty of working under a contract, especially at UPS, and I think Brother Atkins would agree with, if you were working non-union, companies would just be able to put AI wherever they wanted. They'd be able to put inward-facing cameras wherever they wanted. They'd be able to utilize any technology, and people would be getting disciplined and or losing their jobs. That's not happening at UPS. Are there issues with lytics and some of the other technologies? There absolutely is. And that's the beauty of being under a union contract, because we've got a grievance and arbitration process. And I know this grievance was filed, I believe, last March, and it's scheduled to be heard in January. And I know, just based on the language that we negotiated, that you ratified, our members ratified, that we will prevail in this case. We've got some great questions from Instagram. The first one is from Ring PR Girl asks, can we please talk about higher education isn't the devil? Now, look, I think people, if you read what's been going on, especially with technology and AI and the threat of technology and artificial intelligence, there is a real threat to higher education, because people are saying, why should I go get my college degree in accounting? Or why should I become an analyst? Or why should I become a doctor or imaging person when AI could eliminate my job at some point in time? And those are valid concerns. I think anybody that has the opportunity to get an education should take full advantage of that. I know there's been an attack on higher ed for many reasons, not just the threat of jobs being eliminated that are talked about and taught at these colleges and universities, but also, there's been allegations and statements made that, a lot of these colleges and universities are now teaching their political viewpoints as a result of teaching a curriculum. And there's been some criticism on that. And I'll just say this, I didn't graduate college, but it's probably one of the regrets I have in my life, not getting a college degree. And I'm not sure I would have used that college degree, because I knew from day one I wanted to be a truck driver and work in the Teamsters Union. I encourage anybody that has the opportunity to get an education to get it. But, the one thing you got to remember, and I think people have been talking more so now than ever, is some of these higher education college and universities adopting a curriculum that support trades. When you really think about it, AI can't swing a hammer, AI can't fix a toilet, and AI can't wire a house. So those are very noble professions. And if some jobs will be eliminated that require a college degree, then maybe we should look at creating trade schools in these colleges and universities and training these trades for college graduates. And these trades that would encourage learning a trade, but also learning how to run a business while in school, could go hand in hand to the success of working people in this country. The next is from Stun Gun. What a name. Stun Gun 81. Would you ever consider running for any political position? And if so, which one? I would never run for any political position in this country. My heart and soul is with the Teamsters Union. My heart and soul is protecting working men and women in this country. And I can do it and be very influential from my position as a general president. I have no desire. If someone asked me, you should run for governor, I have no desire to run for any political office. So unfortunately or fortunately, that won't be happening in my future. Now, Brendan asked, who has been my biggest influence in my life? Well, certainly my biggest influence are my parents. You know, I was able to watch my dad, who passed away while working still in the Teamsters Union. I had the best upbringing as far as watching someone go to work every single day, work 2 to 3 jobs, grind out a living so that my brothers and I could have a decent life growing up. But more importantly, he demonstrated what hard work was and the benefits of working hard on behalf of your family, and having integrity and a moral compass, especially when times got tough. He was always encouraging about, look, times are tough, but the Teamsters Union has our back, always will. And there was no truer word spoken. But I also got to give credit to the matriarch of the family, my mother, Eileen. You know, here's a woman who grew up in the projects, public housing, raised her 3 younger brothers, and then also had 3 boys, myself, my older brother, Billy, and my younger brother, Michael. And this lady is not corruptible. She's very stern, but very nurturing at the same time. And she taught us tremendous life values. She taught us what it is to be a good human being. But more importantly, whether we were right or wrong, always supported us. And I got to say, it's been definitely my mother and father has been my biggest influence. This is another great name. Nikki Sins asks, more rank and file on the show. It'd be nice to see you guys from different industries and regions on. We are definitely, this has been a year that we're coming up on a year when we launched this podcast, and we have been successful in getting politicians, getting Hollywood actors, getting influential people, and we've had great success having rank and file members on the show. I think we've had some other union leaders from other different unions on this show, and we are going to focus moving forward on having more people that are rank and file, having more people that work in blue-collar industries in different regions. So we are, like anything else, we are continuously testing and see what works. But there's no doubt our bread and butter is going to be with working people in rank and file. We will incorporate more of that on the show moving forward. Kelly-.215 asks, why isn't there a rate standard for hourly wage workers in America? $18 to $22 are stale. I think, Kelly, if you look at a lot of progressive states like Massachusetts, you look at New York, you look at California, you look at Chicago, they have some of the highest wages, minimum wage in the country. A lot of right-to-work states have, horrific minimum wages like $7.50 to $8 per hour. And that's the beauty of organizing and joining a union. When you are beholden to a state, regardless if it's progressive or not progressive, to determine the wage rate, that's kind of a 50-50 shot of not being able to increase that. When you join a union and you're able to make demands and negotiate, then that standard earnings is based upon what you're able to negotiate in a contract. Like take, for instance, United Parcel Service. Before going into these negotiations, previous negotiations, part-timers were making less than $14 per hour for a Fortune 500 company. Part-timers in some major cities were on subsidized housing, food stamps, and we were able to demonstrate, as a result of how much money the company made, how much they gave to Wall Street, their shareholders, that we were able to drive that starting wage rate for part-timers up to $21 an hour, which will increase before the terminations agreement to $23 an hour starting rate of pay. It would be great for every state to adopt a wage rate that's higher than $22 an hour. But I will say this, the one way you're going to increase any pay in this country is to work under a collective bargaining agreement and be represented by a union. Now, Squid Jr., 1953, just wrote Amazon. Now, Amazon is one of the largest white-collar crime syndicates in the country. They have their dirty little hands in everything that we do as Americans, as American workers. They are the biggest threat to our largest employer, many other employers in many different divisions that we represent. We have had successful organizing campaigns throughout the country. Amazon in New York was the first in 2022 to win an election under the NLRB, and we merged that union into the Teamsters Union. And we have still not gotten Amazon to the table to bargain. And we're going to continue to fight and litigate Amazon. We struck Amazon last December, where we've organized 22,000 of these DSP models that use a third-party leasing arrangement to deliver their packages. We took a 1-week strike during Christmas. We are making inroads every single day at Amazon. And that Amazon organizing opportunity is going to be the biggest challenge that we have. We're committed to it. It's a 5 to 7 year process. It's member-to-member worker mobilization, and failure is not an option. And we've got to encourage legislation like the Faster Labor Contracts Act to be passed so that we can organize Amazon. Amazon is a company that focuses on distressed communities. Amazon's a company that has a 150% turnover ratio of their part-timers. Amazon is a company that continuously wants to recycle people in and out. And Amazon, for the American worker, the way it's structured right now, is not a path to a career. So we need to be focused and not be afraid to make the investments in organizing Amazon. Well, I want to talk about Dick Torndorf, 91970 asks, how did kids who grew up in the city with family values become leftist politicians? Now, I would assume leftist politicians would be the far left of the Democratic Party. It's a different society right now. I grew up in the city, and there's no doubt I embraced the values that my parents instilled in us, and I'm a Democrat. But I think you can't blame kids who grew up in the city with family values for taking a political position either far left or far right. I mean, when you really think about the political parties in this country, they have driven people one way or the other. When you think about Democrats, and I was brought up, my family were strong Kennedy Democrats. Democrats worked on behalf of working people. Democrats knew their constituency, and they always fought hard for working people. That script flipped at some point in time over the last 10 to 15 years where, people who once embraced the Democratic Party for being champion for working people were starting to see that legislation was being passed like NAFTA, CAFTA, a lot of these trade deals where we lost a lot of jobs. And those were all Democratic policies that were driven into legislation where we saw a lot of our jobs go overseas. We saw workers not being protected. So I think people started to look at examples of bad trade deals, the elimination of jobs, the steel industry going to third world nations and shipping that stuff back here. I think people started to realize that, hey, even though these Democrats that supported us for all these years are now causing the demise of some of these good American jobs. And conversely, you had Republicans that were embracing corporations, which they continue to do, embracing an anti-worker agenda. Now you've seen that script flipped to an extent where we do have Republicans that are working to protect jobs in their states. We do have Republicans that are working with us to create legislation, and we want to do that bipartisan. So I think a good way to eliminate any leftist position or any right-wing position is get back to basics and work together and have difference of opinions, but come to solutions that aren't determined by what political affiliation you choose to be with. These are very trying times in this country, from the far left and far right. We just all have to bring it back to the middle and work together on behalf of the most important people in this country. Those are working people.